John F. Kennedy's domestic policies and assassination. John announced his official candidacy for president in 1960. Kennedy was the Democratic nominee for president. The Republican nominee was Richard M. Nixon. Kennedy was the first Catholic and the youngest man to be elected president. Kennedy's first presidential interest was in foreign affairs. Eisenhower made a law that the major party candidates could have TV time for debates. This allowed the major party candidates to have live debates. All the debates with Nixon were scheduled to last an hour. The main structure was the audience would ask them questions and they would each get to reply. The first debate was over domestic affairs and was aired in Chicago. During Kennedy's presidency, he presided over the Civil Rights Movement. Kennedy made it possible for the first African American to be enrolled into the University of Mississippi in September of 1962. The last year of his presidency, Kennedy made a civil rights movement that was not enacted until he was already dead. John F. Kennedy had a lot of promises for his presidency, one of which was adventuring into the new frontier. Later on in his presidency, John F. Kennedy started addressing the problem areas and new areas of exploration with science, space, and poverty. The ideas had a hard, light-bringing process that took a lot of time. The economy was he cut down on his deficit spending that the New Deal was based off of. The issue of poverty was brought to national attention by author Michael Harrington, who wrote the book The Other America. This made Kennedy realize that poverty was an issue, and he addressed it by creating the Peace Corps and Kennedy's. The Peace Corps had proposals for it in the 1950s. Kennedy gave it more thought and brought it to life on the last day of his presidential campaign. When Kennedy proposed it, he was on his way to revamping foreign policy while using goodwill and a Peace Corps of young Americans. The earliest act of the Kennedy administration was the signing of an executive order. The first astronaut in space was Yuri Gagarin. On April 12, 1961, not even a year later, the U.S. launched a communication satellite by the name of Telstar. About 7 years later, the U.S. sent Apollo 11 into space that then landed on the moon. The U.S. was now the only country that had landed. On November 22nd, the Kennedys landed in Texas to help with political issues. Later that week, Kennedy and his wife were driving in an open-air limo with the governor, John Connally. After Kennedy was shot, he was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where at 1 p.m. was pronounced. Kennedy's funeral was very devastating to the entire country as they had lost their greatest leader since Abraham Lincoln. Kennedy's flag-draped casket was carried in a horse-drawn chariot. The entire nation ceased work for the president's funeral. 250,000 Americans came to Kennedy's visitation. He was later buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The murder charges were put on Lee Harvey Oswald. One day as he was being transferred between jails, Lee Harvey Oswald was shot in the back of the head by a mysterious man who came out of the thick crowd on November 22nd. People think that Kennedy was killed by the Central Intelligence Agency because he got fed up with the CIA because he found out that they were trying to kill Cuban leader Fidel Castro. The CIA got worried that Kennedy would be disbanded, so they ordered Oswald to kill. Kennedy had a lot of promising things but was never able to follow through with them, as he was assassinated early on in his presidency. As the country and his family mourned, one thing will live on forever, and that he was a phenomenal president, and everyone loved him.
Created using Powtoon.